Yeah, so hi everyone. Absolutely delighted to introduce the first panel of the afternoon, Breaking Barriers, AI Research and Innovation. And thanks, Thomas, for the introduction. And I just want to take a few minutes to allow my esteemed panel to introduce themselves also. So Karen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Myers. I am the director of the Artificial Intelligence Center at SRI International, one of the sponsors for this event. So I've been working in AI my whole career. I did a PhD at Stanford many years ago, but ever since then I've been at SRI leading a group that does both very foundational and applied research in AI. If you're not familiar with SRI, we used to be the Stanford Research Institute. We started originally as part of Stanford. We like to joke we were the original spin-out company from Stanford. We're now an independent, not-for-profit organization based both here. This is our building here in Palo Alto, now that we've absorbed Park, and also in Menlo Park, California. So yeah, maybe I'll just throw out one more thing. I mentioned we do a lot of basic research and also more applied work. We really like to pride ourselves on having our research make it from the laboratory out into the real world. So probably the best example of that is Siri. Siri actually started as a basic research project in the lab that I run. And we spun out a little company, and Steve Jobs came to see a demo and he said, I want that on the iPhone. And that was the birth of Siri. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Parli. I lead the research and education programs at Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. So those of you who aren't familiar with it, we're a group within Stanford, interdisciplinary, with the mission to advance AI research, education, policy, and practice to improve the human condition. So my role is any programming that brings researchers together, develop new research connections, and then elevate that work through our education programs out into the broader community. My background before Stanford, I was in management consulting, where I did a lot of machine learning and data science approaches to help nonprofits, government organizations, biotech companies with their strategy. And academically, I have an undergrad in industrial engineering from Arizona State and a master's in management consulting and computational mathematics from Johns Hopkins.
Hello, I'm Bethany Edmunds. I'm the Assistant Dean for Seattle and Vancouver of the Computing Programs for Northeastern University. I'm also the Director of the Masters of Artificial Intelligence at there. So we have lots of programs on, I think, 12 different campuses around the world. And so I oversee the Pacific Northwest for computing. My background is reinforcement learning. So my PhD was in robotic navigation using reinforcement learning back before artificial intelligence was going to be anything. So yeah, it'll be a great discussion.
Brilliant. Thanks, ladies. So Karen, I'm going to come to you first, but actually got the same question for all three of you. And interested to learn about some of the influential AI research done by women, and what can we do to kind of encourage progress in that area?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to name two women. I hope that's okay. I wanted to call out to a woman who worked at SRI before I even got there. Her name is Helen Wolf. And the reason I want to bring up Helen is that many of you are probably aware in the early days of computing, way back in the ENIAC, programming was considered beneath the male scientists. And so that was a role for women. Women were programmers. It was deemed a sort of not very intellectually demanding activity, and that's why the women did it. Of course, things changed and men came to take over software engineering. Not that we don't have some women who are engaged with it, but it was really interesting how that was the case, that it was considered less important and therefore a role for women. Helen Wolf is an interesting case because she was really the first robotics programmer. So at SRI, we had this project that many of you probably heard of called Shaky the Robot. It was the very first embodied AI system that could perceive its environment, reason about what it was doing, accept tasking from an individual, and then take actions in the physical world to achieve goals that it derived from the tasking that it received. And Helen was the star programmer for that effort. So It's kind of history repeating itself, I guess, that a lot of the fame and attention went to the male researchers on that project, but she was an integral part of the success of the Shaky the Robot project. Coming to more modern times, a woman scientist that I think really deserves recognition is Professor Feifei Li from Stanford. She's an amazing woman, has had an incredible career, a very talented researcher. I also think she doesn't quite get in some circles, doesn't quite get the attention that she deserves. So one thing that she has contributed to the field was she really pioneered this ImageNet database and this whole ImageNet competition, which really kind of sparked the modern revolution in AI. So ImageNet was a collection of images that had been labeled, so it made it possible for deep learning algorithms to train on the data. And that was something that had not been present before. And so having that as a resource in the community really kind of opened the floodgates to a lot of really valuable and important research on how to build deep learning systems that could effectively learn from this kind of data. So in addition, she is a huge proponent of inclusiveness in AI, and she's even started this organization called AI for All, where she's really trying to get a more diverse set of researchers and other people engaged with the AI community.
Yeah, so yes, big fan of Feifei Li. She actually is a co-founder of Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. So definitely agree on both of those women. I'll go more for more like the younger generation in two areas of AI that I find most exciting. One, robotics, and two, AI and science, which we kind of just heard about here earlier. So one is Jeanette Bogg. She's a roboticist at Stanford, and she's really looking at how we can create robots that really are effective in the real world. So right now, a big ingredient for AI is data. For robotics, there isn't a lot of data on how humans move in the real world. So she's looking at mostly hand manipulation right now and trying to gather data and figure out how we can make robotic hands that actually work well. And if you think about it, robotic hands aren't they're very different than human hands. So just like videos of human hands don't translate as well for robotics. So she's doing some really exciting work. And then also on the science side, Dr. Emma Lumberg just received a pretty large grant from HAI looking to build a multimodal foundation model for cells. So essentially like a digital twin of cells where we can test out different therapeutics and different drugs to better understand how individual people would react to those drugs based on their race, based on comorbidities, et cetera. So I think this is a really exciting area around furthering science, around biological discovery. And then I wanted to mention, I also had some pregnancy complications where the doctors were like, I don't know. So kind of these foundation models for cells so that we can experiment on biology, I think is a really exciting area.
Thanks. I'll talk about two of my colleagues that I just am honored to work with. So Tina Eliassi-Rod, she does a lot of network science, most recently explainability in networking, so that especially on social networks, you can start to see where biases are coming in and how the predictions are being made. And another one is Safe Savage. Both of these are at Northeastern. Safe does a lot of work retooling some of the gig working algorithms so that the power imbalance that often comes out gets evened out, as well as she's working with some indigenous populations to make sure that, so a lot of her work is recognizing the power imbalance that comes out of artificial intelligence and how to retrain the algorithms and make sure that the data that's in there is more representative so that it makes it an even playing field.
That's fantastic. Really, really great to hear about some female pioneers in AI. Bethany, I'm going to just stick with you for a minute. You kind of touched briefly on bias, gender bias in AI systems. How much of an issue is it?
I think it's a huge issue. I mean, I think bias throughout all of our systems is problematic. And it's from the data that's collected to what problems we're trying to solve to how it's being implemented and where it's being applied. Throughout the life cycle of any algorithm, the bias that comes out, and I'll say it stems from the lack of diversity in the field. right? So whoever's building the system has a lot of decisions that they make. And because it's not done by a diverse group, the implicit, I only have this experience and all the people around me have the exact same experience, so that it's not the best solution for everyone.
Yeah, and I think, again, kind of touching on that point around lack of diversity in the field of AI, what can we do? What can we do to encourage more women to get into AI? Why is it important, particularly for kind of diversity and research? And that question to all of you, really interested to so Karen, maybe starting with you on that one.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. I gave a talk about a month ago, and it, for me, it was just sort of a run-of-the-mill thing. And it turned out there was a young high school student in the audience, and she came up to me and she said, "I want to thank you so much for speaking. I would like to do research in AI, and it's really great to have a female role model." And I was thinking, oh, I'm not a role model. I'm just up here doing my job. I didn't do anything special. But then I reflected on that and I thought, it was really striking that she had that impression. So I think that's one thing, is for women to get out there and be visible and let young women see you and see what, see that you're successful, that there are pathways out there for them so they can envision themselves in the field. I have to say, throughout both my undergraduate and my graduate career, I didn't have a single female professor, not a single one. And unfortunately, the graduation rates for PhDs in the US, at least I'm familiar with those statistics, are still remarkably low. Only 20% of the PhDs are going to women these days. So we definitely have to fill the pipeline. We need to get more women who are studying in the field. And I think a lot of that just has to go to, making it possible for young women to envision themselves being successful in this field.
Thank you. Vanessa, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So a few thoughts. One, this 20% number. So every year HAI releases an AI index that is kind of like the state of the field of artificial intelligence. And we look at the gender difference for undergrad, master's, and PhD. And we see that 20% across all of those areas for computer science courses, not secondary education in general. So this is, and it has remained consistent. So this is an ongoing issue. Another aspect is just making women feel welcome in those spaces. So one example, when I was in an undergrad, I went into like one of the very first like undergraduate computer science courses. It was like the first day. I sat down and the guy next to me turns to me, very helpful, nice, goes, "Excuse me, this is CS 102 or whatever. Is this where you're supposed to be? Like, do you need directions?" I'm like, "No, like, yeah, like this is where I'm supposed to be." And my personality, when someone like questions if I can do something, I take it as a challenge and stay there. But many, especially young women, might not do that. And I mean, this continues. So like even recently, I was on a call with a collaborator, and he starts mansplaining what a collab notebook is. And I'm like, why do you assume that I don't know what a collab notebook is? Like, I lead this research organization on AI at Stanford. So he was trying to be helpful, but just kind of like these microaggressions that are unintentional, and just being aware of those. And when you see them happening, calling them out, because calling them out for yourself when it happens to you is a little awkward.
Bethany?
What was the question again? No. I think definitely the things that are being said here, making sure that one of the things that really kills me, I have two small children, and is hearing stuff, "Oh, math is so hard," and just being like, "Oh, it's okay, you don't need to know math," right? And that happens a lot to women, and being like, you don't say reading is hard, we're not going to do reading, right? And being demystifying and saying, you can talk about artificial intelligence, you can talk about math, you can do this is just another thing to solve, and not making it seem like it's unattainable, right? I think one of the things, as I do more work in the AI ethics space, is recognizing how much everybody has a voice in how it affects your life. And so whether you're actually programming it yourself, or you're interacting with Siri or that, you actually have a say in how it plays out. Every day, artificial intelligence is affecting more and more of what we do. And I think the first step is not saying, I can't talk about that because I don't have a PhD. You know how it's affecting your life. And that's the first step, is to say, okay, you know, this tool is being used. A great example is, you know, some of the off-the-shelf tools, you're just like, oh, what can it do? And it's trying to solve things like, I can determine which ramen shop this bowl is from. And that's what a computer vision technology is being shown as doing. Or we were just talking about a language model, and they're like, oh, it's explaining how I can do more on my yacht. And it's like, that these aren't very useful applications, right? Let's be honest. It definitely doesn't appeal to many people. And so recognizing there are these tools, and just using the tools in a way that helps more people, that identifies with your life, allows you to get in that space. It allows you to bring a new application to help more people. And as you're more and more comfortable in that space, then you can say, okay, I can learn more. I can do this, because you're an expert in your own experience and in your own life, and how that technology affects your life, whether or not you develop that technology, whether or not you know exactly how it's coded. And so that's a great starting point, to just be an advocate for yourself and how the technology affects you. And then you can be in that space, and then you can learn more if you want to, and you can go and change that technology. But you always have a place to speak to how it affects you.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Karen, I'm going to come back to you. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the impact of AI across different countries, and where, you know, perhaps are we seeing kind of the greatest kind of advances, I guess, in AI research?
Well, definitely the U.S. is leading in that area. I mean, we're in the heart of Silicon Valley here. We see a lot of the innovation going on here. I mean, it's fascinating. So I live locally, and it's amazing. I was out with my children, the local hamburger shop, and we sat down and we were waiting for our burgers, and both tables on either side of us, people were talking about their LLM-based startups that they were working on. So it's just in the water here. I mean, everybody is just so invested, emotionally invested in AI. It just kind of permeates the culture. So, but I mean, having said that, you know, there's a lot of talent across the world, a lot of excellent work happening in Europe. You know, China has made huge leaps and bounds in terms of capabilities. You know, one thing that's enabling that there is that they've had monitoring apparatus in place, that they've been able to collect a lot of data about their citizens. So data is what drives the AI economy. So that's something that's really enabled progress there. But interestingly, I know this from the HAI index, having read that. It was last year that China actually surpassed the US in terms of number of publications at the main AI conferences. So yeah, China's a real powerhouse.
That's really good. And I have to talk about this because, you know, from the UK, I still feel like we're attached to Europe, certainly. In Europe, obviously, we've just had the AI Act published. And so just interested again to kind of hear your thoughts on regulation, and really, you know, is regulation a good thing in AI? Can it stifle innovation? What are your thoughts, Vanessa? Maybe coming to you first.
Yeah. So I'm no expert in regulation. HAI does have a whole like policy team that looks at this. But kind of generally what we're thinking is AI can be both. Like the right regulation can speed up innovation and adoption. Like if people feel like they are protected and safe using and developing this technology, then they will do more of it. But too much and in the wrong ways can stifle. And I don't think we really exactly know what the right mix is. And it'll take iterations, but it could do both.
Bethany, your thoughts?
So that's a question I actually hear a lot. So I'm also the president of the board for the Artificial Intelligence Network for British Columbia. So it's an industry association up in Canada, and Canada's kind of, they don't know who they are. So they're you know, we were very much, we want to know what the US is doing, and we want to be like the US, but also like Britain is still our mommy and daddy. So like, you know, we spell things with S's and Z's, right? Like, and say Z and Z. And so it's very interesting. So many of the corporations want to come to Silicon Valley because there is less regulation and the innovation comes here. But at the same time, to launch a company to go past startup, you have to go to the UK and you need to go to the European Union to hit those regulations. And so I think it's very interesting to have the combination of those two, because the startup I get that idea going, to recognize, okay, is this possible? But then to recognize, okay, to roll out to everyone, let's think about everyone. Because I think something that I'll say the more, social minded governments do think about, okay, maybe there's a group of or population or a use case that Silicon Valley didn't think about. And that's the government's job, is to think about how does this affect everybody and who is being left in the margins. And I do think that's the government's role. It's slow and it does stifle innovation, but it also minimizes harm. And so I think that, we obviously want to get innovation. We want to move things forward, but I think that having that, okay, let's slow down at a certain point, let's recognize, and it's going to take time, but hopefully that will minimize harm in the long run.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Thank you. Last question from me, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. But I mean, we've got a room full here of inspirational female leaders. What are your thoughts on kind of balancing, a career in research and then, wanting to move from kind of technical kind of expertise through to leadership and management? Again, to all three of you, really, what are the sorts of things that you can kind of recommend for, somebody wanting to progress throughout their career and kind of having that balance there?
Make a comment. Yeah, so I mean, I do think it helps to just know that it is like a very different skill set. And over the past few years, I have moved more from like behind the computer doing like the coding and the analysis to more people leading and strategy for the organization. And sometimes I'm like, I just need to go back to like behind the computer. Like that's just better. But yeah, it's just like continuously learning. You're learning new skills and knowing that it is different. So there's space to learn.
Karen?
I wanted to compliment Amy Jo on her presentation. I thought it was very thought-provoking, very well done. And I think that's part of it, right? I see a lot of men who they envision themselves as making that transition from the technical to the leadership. And a lot of the women I know who are very capable of doing that tend to pull back, and they say, oh, no, there must be other people who are better at this than I am. And they don't put themselves forward for those kinds of leadership positions. So, there's a learning curve to making that jump, as Vanessa said. And, anybody is capable of doing that if you want to put in the hours, put in the effort so that you can be successful in that new kind of role. So yeah, I would encourage people, envision yourself doing that kind of thing, because you are capable of doing that. Don't assume because there might be somebody who's a little bit more self-confident that they're actually better at it than you could be.
That's fantastic.
I think there are different kinds of leaders. And to your point, not everybody has to show up the same way. And so you can lead in your own way. I think whether or not you should do it depends a lot on what drives you. And what I think there's a work-life balance question. There's a fulfillment question that definitely comes out of it. I love that as a leader, I can, like, we founded the Vancouver campus. So I was the first faculty there. And that was exciting because I could do something. And we got more than 50% women in our entire campus 5 years later, with 93% graduation rate, right? So that's exciting. That's something that not only a leader could do, but so I think it gives you the power to do things and to allow you to build what you want in the world. But it does take a toll, and it does take time, and you have to figure out, just because you can, do you really want to? And sometimes as women, we have other burdens, whether it's our parents or our children, or there's other responsibilities that we have. And sadly, that does fall on us a bit more. So sometimes it's maybe not worth it either.
Yeah.
I want to make one comment on that as well. There is this issue, right? We know that in the C-suite, there is underrepresentation of women. So kind of this, like, do we want to be there? And thinking about like our family responsibilities and stuff, like, are there ways we can start to change the norms of business where you don't have to make as many of those considerations? Like, but I mean, I know we have a lot of nighttime events. A lot of times women have to miss out because they are more tend to do the childcare duties. Like, do we need all of those nighttime events? Like, it's just some of the norms I think we can start rethinking.
No,
Or
definitely.
even having childcare. I've been at
Yeah.
women's events where they have childcare in the
Yeah.
night. So why not do that? It's actually not very much, and the legal, there's always the legal part of it, but there are, exactly, there are ways that we can question it. And as leaders, why are we not, to your
Yes.
point,
Yeah.
why not now, right? Why, maybe the next thought exchange, we have childcare here,
Yeah.
right? Why not?
Yeah. That's fantastic. Ladies, thank you so much. Should we open up to questions?
We have a few more
Have a
minutes. Yes,
few?
please.
Yeah, so yeah, opening up.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for mentioning childcare. Actually, one of my colleagues could make it because she has a 2-year-old. So maybe next time. My question on the industry transformations, right, and lifelong learning. So I started my career when the internet.com was just on the upswing. I got into that, and at that time we talked a lot about digital inclusion. In terms of research, and even back then, these are really hard fields. Right? First of all, it's very deeply technical fields. Networking was very deeply technical, but I actually saw more women in that era than I'm seeing now in the AI space. And so for those of you who have seen these industry transitions, what really happened and what should we be doing different? Because in the last 20 years, the numbers have not moved. If you look at the percentage, there was more actually in the networking internet era than I'm seeing now in the AI.
Can you quickly repeat that, because the online people do not hear the question?
Sure. So the question was, in network in particular, but over time, the number of women has actually gone down in certain fields, and in AI in particular. We're seeing very few women, and what can we do about that? Is that the question? Yeah, I think that, I mean, this is my own personal opinion, but we at Northeastern tried to get not only women, but people of different backgrounds, ethnic and economic, and just different populations into computer science. And it's not necessarily appealing to them if we don't see an application. If it is just, oh, we can make a company that makes this much money and you have to go to school, but then you'll be a millionaire. Well, maybe that's not really why I want to do it. And so I think driving, so what we've done to up our numbers, like I said, to 50% is interdisciplinary. So we have a pathway to computer science that allows people to have a bachelor's in something else and go into computer science. And so then they come out and they're saying, okay, now I'm in biotech, now I'm in fintech, now I'm in these other fields, and I can apply these technologies in a way that helps my community, because a lot of women and a lot of other communities, they want to solve problems that help their peers, that help their families. We've heard these stories. I heard them last night and today. And so I think that having a reason to go into it, and then a supportive environment. Once you're in the class, it's not just about the applications, it's about support and telling people they can do it and staying in it. And so out of Northeastern, there's the Center for Inclusive Computing that is now working with, I believe, 50 schools that are looking at their undergraduate programs and trying to improve that retention, because what's happening is we're actually driving women out of computer science. They go in at 18 and they're like, I'd rather be in math, I'd rather be in those other fields because they're more welcoming. So really being, building that system that says you can do this and you can solve these problems and you deserve to be here.
So on the same topic, I've been reading about there's 7 major companies that are pulling away from DEI. So it appears you have a much more difficult struggle. And so are you geared up for it? Do you notice it specifically in Silicon Valley? Or is this primarily in other regions?
Yeah, I mean, so I do think even in Silicon Valley, there's kind of this like, pulling back from DEI, but I don't think that means it's not going to happen. Like, I mean, yeah, we're all continuing to try to make spaces inclusive and do various things that can still enhance like the diversity within the field. Maybe they're not like specific DEI initiatives, but like also maybe it shouldn't have been separate anyway. Maybe it should just be like integrated across everything generally. Not to dismiss it, like I think it's important, but I don't think it's going to go away.
So as an educator, it is a big fear that I have is that we get all these women into computer science and then they go into jobs where they just are like, what did I spend my money and time on? And they go back to their own field. So we actually partner, and when we do tech career fairs and get speakers in, we look to see, are they DEI friendly companies? And then the other thing is groups like Women in Machine Learning, they're not taking money from these organizations anymore because a lot of people are just like, I'm going to put money and then my name is on, you know, and it looks like I support women in this event. And we say, you know what, if you're not ethically minded, if you're not actually supporting women, then we're not going to give you our stamp of approval. So I think by doing some of that, by speaking up and saying, it's not a great place to work, you shouldn't go there, at least then you're protecting the people that you're building up.
Maybe one more question.
Hi, y'all. Okay, so my question is related to a lot of your backgrounds and mostly the comment that had been made about, you know, walking into CS 102 or 101 and being like, are you in the wrong place? Because I've definitely been there and it's the worst. But you discussed your educational experience and the inclusivity that goes along with it. How do you feel that the rollback of affirmative action is going to impact the inclusive nature of AI?
So I'm a Canadian, and and I actually got a DEI scholarship, and this is I'm an American first, and then I moved to Canada, and we got money for a DEI scholarship, and it as an American, it broke my heart because the lawyer said, actually, we need to take out the DEI statement because of the American Supreme Court, and I was like, it's so heart-wrenching that like we want to do this, and we actually had to take it out. I think that it wasn't all of the things that we talked about in the last two questions, right, were there when the affirmative action plans were in place. So I think it's going to hurt it. But I think that I'm very hopeful that the efforts that we're leading will be more productive in that space and we can go around it. So we found our lawyers, the team that wanted to do it, were like, okay, we're going to use this wording instead, right? I'm not going to tell you about the wording because I don't know who's watching, but we are legally following the law. It was verified that we are still giving scholarships, not DEI based, but they will make it to the right groups. And so I think that the people that really want to do the work are going to continue to do the work. The question is, where do they do it? I think it's going to change where that work happens. I'm hoping people leave certain states where it's not being supported. But maybe they leave the US. Can I say that? Am I allowed to say that here? Right? I don't know, right? There are some companies that are, Vancouver is very close to Seattle and they're moving to another country that is more supportive and in line with their values. So I think I'm hopeful that there are enough people that want to do the work, that there are places to do the work.
Like maybe this is a good like call to action. Like all of us in the room, like there are ways around it. Like let's get creative and figure out maybe even better solutions than that can make more progress. Like that the progress has been slow anyway. So like let's get creative.
So living in Northern California, you know, we're not necessarily representative of what the rest of the United States is like, but, you know, certainly here, my perspective is that with the various focus on DEI over the last several years, that has absolutely raised awareness. You know, I see within my own company, it's something that our senior leadership talks about all the time. They really care about it. We have internal metrics about improving diversity at all levels of the organization. So yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see what the impact is, given the ruling against affirmative action. But following up on what Vanessa was saying, I think one thing I'm heartened by is just seeing organizations like this one, meetings like this one, because I think having been one of a very small number of women in my field when I started out, and well, actually through the whole time, but especially when I started out, the thing I missed out on most was networking. And so I think opportunities like this, forums like this are what's really going to enable us to get more women into the field, more diverse people into the field, because they're going to feel connected. They're going to feel like there are other people like them within the field, and they have people to turn to as they progress through their careers. So I want to thank the organizers, Tom and Carolyn, for this, and the whole committee. I think we need many more forums like this. And I think if we continue along these lines, we will see the diversity that we want in the field.
And we can vote, right? I can say that. That's not political. We can vote.